Rosh Hashanah, or as the Torah refers to it, Yom Teruah. The Pasuk says, Yom Teruah Yelachem, a day of the blowing of the shofar, it shall be unto you. The shofar. Most of us, when we think of the shofar, we think of a ram's horn, somewhat large and curved in different colors. But that wasn't always a typical shofar. The shofar could be used from horns of various animals and doesn't necessarily have to be as curved or as curvy as the ones I just showed you. There is a ram's horn as the such that is much flatter, if you will. Notice how thin and flat the shofar is. Practically no curve in it at all except for this upward curve. Or not from a ram whatsoever, but like this old shofar from Halab that belonged to Khamaz Ram. That is the shofar of a young gazelle. Very small, very thin, very narrow, practically straight. So the shofar can come from different animals, it can have different shapes, and of course each shofar gives off a different sound. The purpose of the shofar is to awaken us. Now, when we go through the mahzor on Yom Rosh Hashanah, we finish the Sefer Torah, and to introduce the blowing of the shofar, on the first day we sing a piyut called Eid Sha'ari Rason, and on the second day, Adonai Bekol Shofar. After that, the Hazan generally will say a number of prayers to get him in the frame of mind to connect with Hashem, with Borei Olam, and to allow him to blow the shofar properly and for it to fulfill its purpose. What is the purpose of the shofar? So according to Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, there are numerous purposes: to proclaim the sovereignty of Hashem, to herald the beginning of the 10 days of Teshuvah, as a reminder to be faithful to the teachings of the Torah, a reminder of the words of the Nevi'im, a reminder to pray for the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, a reminder of Akedah Yishak, the binding of Yishak, a reminder of the day of the resurrection of the dead, Tehiyat HaMetim, as a summons to the heavenly court on Rosh Hashanah to be judged by God for our actions, as a reminder for the regathering, the Kibbutz Galuyot, the regathering of the Jewish nation, and finally as a wake-up call to inspire awe, to instill fear of God in the people. This final point was the main point, according to Harambam, to wake up the people to do teshubah, to reconnect with God. So when the Hazan, or when the Tokeya, rather the blower of the shofar, blows the shofar, you will generally see him cover himself with his talit, and you'll see most of the people covering themselves up as well. The reason for this is because you don't want to just be listening to a sound and looking around and seeing what's going on, but rather by closing yourself up, basically creating your own space where you can concentrate without any sort of interruptions. And since you have these 10 various points mentioned by Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, it's very important to concentrate and to not be disturbed. That's why you'll see most people covering themselves up when they're listening to the shofar. Now first we blow 30 sounds while we, the kahal, are seated. Only the person blowing the shofar and those standing next to him at the teva are standing up. So generally you'll have a maximum of 3 people standing at the teva, and the entire kahal will be seated for the initial blows, the first 30 blows of the shofar. Then in the musaf, we have the custom to blow the shofar 10 times, 10 times, and 10 times in the silent Amidah, and then in the Hazara, in the repetition of the Amidah, we do again 10, 10, and 10. We have the Malchuyot, Zichronot, and Shofarot, as they are called. Finally, after the Amidah, customs to blow another 10 blows during Kaddish Kabbal. When we get to the end of the prayer, okay, it's right before Alinu L'Shabeach, we say the final Kaddish Al Yisrael, And after Kaddish Al Yisrael, you'll hear all of a sudden the Hazan will, say Barechu et Elohim Borach. Everybody answer Baruch Adonai Mevorach Ne'olam Va'ed. And then you hear what is known as Teruah Gedolah, a long sound of the Teruah. Now, as we mentioned, the shofar has various sounds, and I'd like to give an example of the sounds so you can see the difference between the sounds that are made in the community by different hazanim or within various communities, how they are made. So the teki'ah, which is the long standard sound, is very simple. Simple teki'ah. Then you have the shabarim. In most communities in the world, it's 3 sounds. But in the Halabi tradition, it could be anywhere from 4 to 7 sounds, and generally in our community here in New York, it's about 5 short sounds. Then you have the Teruah. The Teruah is the much shorter sound, and that sound in most communities in the world is referred to as a 2-2-2 sound. In Syrian communities, in Iraqi communities, in the community of Jerba of Tunisia, it's a different sound called lu-lu-lu. So your typical 2-2-2 sound would be more like this. And your lu-lu-lu sound would be somewhat like this. And then finally, as we said, the Teruah Gedolah at the end will be that Teruah sound, that shorter sound, but for a longer duration of time. Tizku l'shem rabot, ne'imot v'tovot.